Hello, this is Orion Taraban, and this is PsycHacks, Better Living Through Psychology. And today I am very happy to be speaking with Alexander Grace. Thank you for joining us all the way from Australia.
Thank you for having me. Excited.
I've been a fan of Alexander's content personally for years, and I really respect his even-handed evidence-based approach to intersexual dynamics and to relationships in particular. And I think he has a special commitment to helping out men. I think that's in like your Hey Hero program. It's specifically geared towards men and helping them become better versions of themselves, not necessarily just about getting laid, but becoming the best possible men that they can be.
Yes, I am passionate about that. I think I'm of the opinion that men and women's interests are competing with each other in some regards, but typically if people are not working optimally, I think when men's best interests are being served, it actually benefits women. So I don't see it at one as the expense of each other as a zero-sum game. So even though I do help men because I'm a man, I think I can do that better. I'm very pleased to know that the work that I do definitely benefits their girlfriends, benefits their daughters. So I'm all about just alleviating suffering and helping all humans.
Right on. And as you know, I am a psychologist who specializes in men's mental health. So I think that's a real point of commonality between us. And so I'd like to begin by asking, so based on the people that you tend to work with, the men who purchase consultations from you or buy your programs, what are some of the biggest challenges that you see facing men today?
Typically, they come in two forms. One is a variation of I can't seem to get a girlfriend. The other is I'm in a relationship, but it's not working very well. What can I do to fix myself, fix her, fix the relationship so that I'm happier inside my relationship? I know that's quite broad, but it's like, am I answering questions about dating or am I answering questions about relationships? And sometimes the cause of the problems in both arenas can be the same, sometimes different.
Sure, there are different strategies and skills that are necessary at different stages of the courtship and the relationship process. But what's interesting there is I assume you're casting a very wide net. You're talking to all of these guys. They could bring you issues or concerns about anything, but mostly they bring you concerns about women, either women they're trying to date or women they're actually in relationships with, as opposed to their self-esteem or their careers or other things. So do you think that's reflective of where men's minds are at, is that they're generally focused on women?
No, I think that's reflective of my role on the internet, actually. I'm like the women whisperer, right? Like, so I think that they're probably all that other stuff is very important to men and they're seeking those problems out elsewhere. But the Alexander Grace YouTube channel, like what I do is essentially take what is mysterious and unknowable and unexplainable to a lot of men, and then I try and put it in terms that men are able to understand. You know, like if a woman was an algorithm, this would be what it looks like. And so I sort of break that down. So people just generally know in the back of their mind, like, oh, that's that Alexander Grace guy. He seems to understand women, why they do what they do. So when they come up with problems in their lives where I don't understand why women aren't attracted to me, I don't understand why my girlfriend's always mad at me, I don't understand why this is so hard, they just vomit out that information to me, and then I respond, I decode it all. Here's what she's thinking, here's why she's feeling, here's what's going to make it better for her, here's what to do. So whether or not they're seeking out other like things about their career and stuff like that, they probably are. I have no idea if women is actually at the forefront. I just know that that's my job. That's what people come to me for.
Kind of makes sense. So would it be interesting to know how you figured this stuff out? Like, how did you understand that you were the woman whisperer?
I am absolutely fascinated by the differences between men and women. Like, I just, for whatever reason, I find that really, really interesting because it is very distinct. And I'm of the belief that the male experience and the female experience is vastly different. The shared commonality, the humanity is interesting, but it's those points of divergence that I found so interesting. And I also find it so poorly understood. And so when I realized that they were so poorly understood, it was kind of like, oh my God, like, why is there such a huge gap between reality and people's knowledge of that reality? And look at how much good I can do here, which is probably why it became my career. With regards to why I was interested in it personally, I think it's because I recognized very early on that it was my inability to distinguish the differences between men and women that was actually causing the frustrations I was having in the dating market. And this is back when I was like a teenage kid, you know what I mean? Like I had my share of girlfriends or whatever, but mostly I was just kind of blustering about and kind of having accidental successes or just being persistent. I wasn't being smooth. I didn't really understand what I was doing. And when I think back on some of the mistakes I made, it can link back to the fact that I didn't know what women were attracted to. I didn't know how to behave in order to specifically appeal to their femininity. And then when I was 19, my buddy showed me this stuff online about like the pickup artist community. I don't know if you ever got into that kind of stuff, like game and flirtation and seduction techniques or whatever. And I had a good like 9 months of just like studying it and going out with my buddies and like trying all of this stuff. And I just learned so much practically. I was like, oh my God, like women, this is what works. And it just kind of captured my brain. And that's, I think it was in that dichotomy that I really became consciously aware of myself as a man. I was like, because this stuff that's working on women, that would never work on me. Like it's not hitting any part of my resonance, but it's like candy to these girls. Like they are absolutely loving it. And that fascinated me. I don't understand why more people aren't absolutely fascinated by that. And then I got more interested in the other stuff because in the course of my relationship, the more I lent into the fact that I was the man and that she was the woman, you know, when I did get out of game and did decide it was time to sort of settle down, I got more and more successful and the relationship was really good. Like really good. There's no false modesty for me. My relationship was and is really fantastic. And I remember it got to a point maybe 3 years into the relationship where another set of my friends broke up and they were kind of the last couple that I had looked up to and could ask advice about anytime I got to a problem. And so there I was like maybe 25 or something, you know, and I came from my parents got divorced and I was like, I don't think anybody understands how to do this properly. Like nobody seems to be happy in their relationships. Everyone seems to hate their partner and be getting divorced or breaking up, or they can't make it work. They're trying to have, you know, affairs or whatever. And I had worked so diligently on understanding psychology, understanding myself, understanding the differences between men and women. And my relationship was going well. And people started to ask me for advice over a long period of time. And I think that it's kind of an accident, but at some point I started a YouTube channel because I was actually doing research on something completely different, but I came across the red pill on Reddit. And I was like, wow, this is really interesting. It was the first time I had seen evolutionary psychology framed as evolutionary psychology. I was a big fan of Nathaniel Branden. I don't know if you know his work, but the biocentric psychology from like the 60s movement, I was huge on. So I was already kind of familiar with that idea that we have these innate psychological characteristics. But I was like, reading all this red pill stuff, and some of it I was like, that makes sense, but that sounds sexist, or that sounds true, but I don't think people are going to accept that that's true. And I was like, what would happen if we took these ideas out of the internet and then took them to real women on the street? And the idea just kind of amused me. So this was my origin story, is I just wrote a bunch of questions like, the red pill says this about women, and I went to the beach and I filmed women. I was like, this is what they say about women. What do you think? And so the first like 30, 40 videos on my channel was just me interviewing women on the street about these ideas. And generally we found there was a lot of agreement, some really upset disagreement, but it was an interesting discussion. And then that brought me onto the YouTube space. And then I started looking at the other channels that people said were similar to mine and the advice they were giving. And I was just appalled. I was like, oh my God, none of these guys have any idea what they're talking about. Like, this is who people are going to for advice. I was really kind of depressed, and that kind of gave me the confidence boost of like, oh, I think I actually know more than the so-called like experts here. So I started putting my own opinions out online. Obviously I'm very Alexander Gray centric, so I think my content is good, and it's been 6 years or so since I've checked in on what other people are saying, so I have no idea if their stuff is better or if I was just unfair in my initial judgment. But regardless, that was the confidence I needed, and I started my YouTube channel. And I think the success of my channel and the fact that people still seek me out validates that I do kind of know what I'm talking about, and that people do listen. So yeah, that's my story.
Right on. Thanks for sharing. That's really interesting. There's so much in what you just said. I agree. There's a lot of bad advice on the internet generally, both for men and women with respect to what works in relationships and attraction. And while there might be some truth to a lot of red pill stuff, it's often verbalized in a way that is like preaching to the choir, I believe. It's like the the folks who already buy into it, hook, line, and sinker, are going to be nodding vigorously, but it's largely going to be alienating to anybody who hasn't already been, let's say, initiated into that field. And so one of the particular goals of my channel was to take some of those ideas and present them in a way that if I were speaking directly to a woman, she might be able to understand and agree with. Because I don't see the point. A lot of red pill commentators are complaining about this modern state of femininity and women, but they're doing it in a way that is not at all going to cause anyone to change their behavior. So I'm not really sure what their end goal here is, except potentially making men angrier at women for their own business objectives.
Oh man.
So that's
what a pleasure to encounter a mind that's reached the same conclusion that I have. I could say the exact same thing. It frustrates me that there's not an effort made by these guys to try and make this information accessible and mainstream and to bring women on as allies. I'm like, what's the point in staying in our echo chamber? Do we just want to pat ourselves on the back and say we're victims, or do we actually want to improve things? And so every single one of my videos I make with the full awareness that a woman is going to watch it, and I want a woman to agree with everything that I'm saying. That's the standard I set for myself.
right on. Yeah, I feel the same way, because we need each other. Women aren't going anywhere, men aren't going anywhere, and it's great that we're different. And I think that we can learn to work together to greater harmony. When you started talking about when you first became aware of the fact that men and women were vastly different from each other, I have a story about the first time I realized that. It's a very silly anecdote, but I must have been like maybe 11 or 12, and I was watching the musical Grease. Have you seen that with John Travolta and Olivia Newton-John? Okay, so it's a silly high school musical from like the 70s, and there's this number in it called Summer Nights, where John Travolta and his guy friends and Olivia Newton, girlfriends,
I know that scene,
are talking about the date, but they're talking about it in totally different ways. And my 12-year-old mind was blown. I was like, they see it totally differently, but the same thing happened. You know, you get that sometimes in musicals, like in West Side Story, America, the kind of contest between the men and the women over whether, you know, they're pro or con New York City. And it's just, that was actually my entree into the possibility that men and women's psychology was vastly different from each other.
Yep. No, it's a cool story. Yeah, 100%. They're very different, I believe.
And your foray into the PUA stuff, I think, is not uncommon to guys who get into the red pill. I think that pickup artistry is not really an end in and of itself, certainly not one that men, in my opinion, should necessarily aspire to. But it can be really useful, because what pickup artists are fundamentally interested in is effectiveness. They're like scientists with respect to applied behavioral psychology. And like good scientists, on some level, they're kind of value neutral. Is they think, you know, I can't presume to know what should work with this. I'm going to go in and just throw a bunch out there and see kind of what sticks, and then sort of extrapolate my models based on outcomes, as opposed to starting with a value proposition and extrapolating what should work based on what you believe.
Yep.
And I think that's kind of what's great about pickup community in general, is that it is really based on what works, like what makes the plane fly. And the proof is in the pudding, as it were.
And I also think that the very thing that you just elucidated about pickup artists is why you don't see it as a strong force anymore. I don't know about like your audience, but because it was my origin, I started off assuming that most guys had gone through pickup or learned the basics, and it's not the case. The younger generation of guys who discover this stuff, they're more interested in the value discussions. I think the sort of emptiness, I suppose, in terms of actual values in the pickup artistry means that it can't ever become like a collective movement in the way that you see online communities congregate these days. And it also is difficult. It takes work. And I also think that it's less socially appropriate to approach women randomly, you know, back then now than it was, you know, 15 years ago when I was doing it. So I think that there's a lot that's been lost, unfortunately, in the fact that more young men aren't practicing game and developing those skills. They're more likely to just get really down like the red pill or the black pill or whatever like this. And just by way as a disclaimer, I certainly don't consider myself red pill. I know people have applied that label to me, but that's not something I have for myself. So just to sort of clarify, but that bums me out. I would like to see more guys practice their game. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a video that's going to be coming out soon about why men are afraid of approaching women. And partly it's very hard to do that in the shadow of, let's say, the Me Too movement, where there's not only the threat of rejection, but there's the threat of being canceled or being shamed for expressing sexual interest. And that's the world in which we find ourselves. But actually, in listening to some of the comments from my own audience, when I talk about seduction techniques on my channel, the pushback is generally more black-pilled. It's more the juice isn't worth the squeeze. Why go through why learn these skills just to get a woman when a woman isn't, really all that great of a reward anyway? I see a lot of hopelessness among the younger generation. Have you encountered this as well in your own work?
Yeah, 100%.
And what do you think that's about? Like, why is it showing up now?
Things are worse than they've ever been in terms of people getting together. There's more singledom. I think women's hypergamy is stronger than ever before. The expectations on men are very difficult. So it's a lot of that. And I think that the hopelessness, I suppose the giving up, is just the final response of somebody who can't handle rejection or pain any longer. I mean, I think most of these guys would understand that there are some men who are happy in relationships, who found good women, and it's fulfilling all of their needs that they ever wanted from a relationship. Again, you don't want to brag, but without false modesty, like, I'm one of those guys. So it can happen. I know for a fact that it can happen, that you can be very happy and find a good woman. But if you feel like that's beyond you, I suppose you're going to cling to any kind of explanation that sort of gives you permission to give up. That way you don't constantly have to feel like a failure. You know what I mean? Like, if you think of the envy you might feel over a rich person, and all the success and all the the lavish luxury goods that they have. And no matter what, you just don't seem to be able to break into that stratosphere of wealth. You might be very attracted to political ideologies that tell you that rich people are all corrupt and that, money isn't the source of all happiness or whatever like it is. I mean, and it's not. I'm not making that point, but I suppose you look for some kind of justification for your own failure, I suppose, as a kind of numbing effect. Say, it's not me, it's not so bad. And that's a tough one because you can't apply it universally, because it's kind of not their fault in a lot of ways. You know what I mean? Like, the idea that if you don't manage to find success and happiness in a relationship with a high quality woman, therefore it's all on you, is simply not true. Like, there's existential factors at play. It's really hard. The dating market sucks for men. There's also a certain amount of luck. Now, it's true that with enough dedicated effort and information and work over the time, you probably can improve those odds significantly. But with the black pill guys and the doom and gloom, they'll point to a lot of stuff that's absolutely real, absolutely reasonable. It's not an absolute in my mind, but you can't dismiss what they're saying either as though it's all just their own problem and they're just making all this stuff up. No, that's absolutely not the case. So it's a tough line to balance, and I find that I find that it's also an emotionally sensitive topic. A lot of guys will get very upset, I suppose, at any suggestion that they can improve their lot, and that's a bummer that they've gotten to that stage. Almost like the feeling of shame or failure or the loss of happiness or the grief of not having the life they imagined is so painful that any small suggestion that might still be possible for them if they take some personal agency is too much, and they block it angrily. And the psychology of a man who's gotten to that stage is something that really, really concerns me and actually motivates me to continue to make my content, because I certainly wouldn't want them to kind of give up. But I found it's best not to actually talk to them directly in that regard, because it just angers them, too much. It's just too sensitive a subject. So, yeah.
I think grief is a really important word that you just used there, because I do think on some level that men might have to pass through the death of a dream in order to arrive at acceptance of reality. And with the acceptance of reality, the way women really are, the way the world really works, the way the relationships actually function, that you stand the best possible chances of having successful, happy, satisfying relationships. That a lot of relationships that are founded on dreams tend to fail. But there's nothing more painful than the death of a dream. And that's actually what heartbreak is. It's not so much that you're losing what you had, because that's like sacrosanct in your memory. No one can ever take that from you. What you're losing is all the possibilities of what you wanted that you didn't yet attain, the future that you wanted but will never have. And that's really, really hard and heartbreaking to give up. But there could be enough in reality, if you can get through that, that is still worth striving for. Does that make sense?
100%. And I hope to anybody listening to what Dr. Ryan's just said really takes that on board. And let me say from the other side that my relationship now is not what I fantasized it was going to be, but it's better. I promise you it's better. The reality has a certain, like, we all know that when you take reality and then you distort it through your own interpretation, your lens, and you use it to play out some fantasy. Like if you find an average girl with an average personality, but you project on her all this amazingness and you live out this pretend fantasy for a couple of weeks that she's this incredible girl, she's going to solve all your problems. There's a kind of like an amphetamine style like high that comes from that, as like, ooh, I'm getting away from reality, I'm doing this, but you got to keep kind of going. And it's not very satisfying. In fact, it's anxiety provoking. It's not really that good. So in case you're like inclined to not process your grief because you don't want to give up these delusions about how special and amazing women are, they're going to solve all your problems, you'll be happily ever after. In case you don't want to do that work, let me tell you that you're not really giving up anything that's that special. You know what I mean? Playing out that fantasy is not that good. The reality of a good relationship, it's more like calm, it's like gentle, it's peaceful. You know what I mean? There's a sort of quiet satisfaction and pride that never expresses itself with really intense emotions or a huge rush of thoughts or aspirations about the future. No, it's quite grounded and based on the present moment, and it's infinitely more satisfying. So like, grieve because you're not giving up anything good. Like what you get what you get at the end of the grieving the dream, as Dr. Ryan just said, is you get reality, and reality is so much better than anything that you could imagine if you do it right, I suppose. Yeah,
this reminds me of the origin myth of romantic love, which is the myth of Tristan and Isolde. Are you familiar with that myth?
I'm not. And just as a small technical thing, is your camera like bobbing up and down ever so slightly?
Is it? Maybe I'm knocking the table, so it kind of wiggles.
Okay, no worries.
So I'll try not to do that. Thanks for calling that out. So this is like the foundational myth of Western romantic love. It originated in the south of France in like the 13th century. And it's a very interesting story. Tristan is a knight in the service of his king, and he basically drinks a magic potion that causes him to fall in love with the king's wife, and she drinks the same potion, and so she falls in love with him. And so they have this torrid, passionate love affair that exists even though they don't even know each other, even though they don't even really like each other. They kind of are miserable when they're apart, but also like especially miserable when they're together. And in the course of this story, Tristan actually like swears this woman off. This is crazy. I have to stop seeing this woman. And she's like, no, I have to, we can never do this again. And he gets involved with a woman who's in the myth is also named Isolde, but it's a different Isolde. And she's the Isolde of the White Hand. And in this relationship, they live together. Like she is a textile person, and they have dinner together, and they like create a household. It's a peaceful, ordinary relationship that's functional. And Tristan is completely bored. Like he can't stop thinking about the first Isolde. And he eventually leaves that relationship because it felt unfulfilling, like something was missing. And I think this is really important because what you talked about is maybe you can't get everything that you want from a relationship. Maybe part of the problem here is that people are going to relationships expecting the wrong things. But it could be that if you leave those expectations to the side, there's enough that you can get out of an actual relationship to justify, let's say, the sacrifices involved in creating and maintaining it.
Oh my God. Yeah, really well put. So to add on to that, just to flesh it out, put some flesh on the bones here. A lot of people did not grow up with having all of their emotional needs and their attachment needs adequately met by their parents. Parenting in the West is a bit of a disaster. I think we're getting better in some regards, but for the most part, for the generation of me, I'm 35, Dr. Ryan's 40, I think a lot of people kind of become adults, but they're stunted emotionally. They have a bunch of unmet needs. And then you couple that with the fairy tale, happily ever after, Hollywood soulmate kind of fantasy myth. I've got to find my missing half. A lot of people are bringing a huge amount of expectations to their partner. They're going to solve this. They're going to solve that. Like, they're going to fix all of these things. And it's unrealistic. But if you can understand what the limitations of a woman, what a wife or even a boyfriend, if this doesn't have to be gender, but what a partner can do for you, then in the course of that relationship, you will try and get those unmet needs met, realize that it's not appropriate, and then if you're diligent, you can work through it, and that the relationship itself can become an arbiter of reality of what's appropriate to ask of another person and what's not. And you never delve too deeply into codependence. You actually work on becoming two interdependent people that's quite functional. And so it becomes a vehicle for self-growth in a sense. And once you've used that process to its completion, you realize, holy shit, it's through this relationship that I've actually discovered where I start and where I begin, like where my boundaries are, who I am. And I've also helped this other person come that way. At that point, when you're not bonded through obligation or codependence, that's, I think, where true love actually exists. It's a pair bonded trust, respect, mutual enjoyment of each other's company. And it's incredible. It's amazing. But it's specifically all those good things because it never tries to be something that it's not. And so a lot of guys are coming to me, and the fights they're having in their girlfriend are just variations of this exact theme. And so what I tell them is that you'll probably love this as a practicing clinician, but there's nothing wrong with the emotions that you have, the needs that you have, the unmet needs. It's just that she's not the right person to fix that. Girlfriends are not your mothers. And he's like, well, I have a shit relationship with my mother. Like, what am I meant to do? I'm like a 30-year-old man now. It's like, yeah, I get that. Go see a therapist. You know, go see Dr. Ryan. Go see somebody else, because there are actual qualified professionals who exist to help you work through all of that stuff. And you can be codependent. You can have transference with that person. You can play out all of your insecurities in that therapist's office and get those needs met. And it's so much healthier to do that with that person than to try and do it with your relationship, because there are so many good relationships that are ending simply because of unrealistic expectations. And that's a tragedy.
Well, yeah, a lot there. So Robert Johnson.
Am I making really long monologues? I apologize.
No, this is great, man. I'm really enjoying talking with you. So Robert Johnson is a Jungian psychologist. He wrote a book called We, which is a really wonderful book. It's about 100 pages long. People can read it in an afternoon. And it's a Jungian interpretation of the Tristan and Isolde myth. And basically, his fundamental thesis is that romantic love is a conflation of the human and the divine. And that's symbolized by the magic potion that Tristan and Isolde drink. It's made out of herbs, so it's like natural and earthy, but it also is magicked, so it's supernatural. And the danger comes when we expect the other person to be more than human or divine, that they can solve all of our problems, that they can make us complete, that they can make us happy. And another person doesn't and shouldn't and can't have that kind of power over you unless you give it to them inappropriately. And that's a disaster, because we have to remember that in every classic romance in literature and history, every classic romance ends in tragedy, ends in death. And that's because on some level, the romantic idea is that the lovers can be united at once, only in the next life. So it's not possible for romantic lovers to actually live happily ever after here. The romantic narrative, the narrative arc of romance is tragedy. And that's why the romantic cause is always the one that's the underdog, the one that doesn't really have any chance of winning. It's hard to root for the Yankees unless you're from the Bronx or you have no soul, because they have, you know, all those championships. It's hard to root for the thing that works, the thing that's successful. people don't like to do that for whatever reason. Now, you mentioned something else, though, which is besides the expectation. You didn't use this word, but what I think you were getting at is like wounding. So
what was the word?
Wounding. Like they have people have emotional wounds. Okay. Like maybe they had a shit relationship with their mother, and so now they have shit relationships with their girlfriends. Like that's not an accident. So what I've discovered, and I have a video on this that's forthcoming, is in my own experience, when I was in my 20s, I had this like sixth sense. I could walk into a room full of women and just like be able to pick out the one that I could ride the roller coaster with, because like my emotional wound would resonate in the presence of a complementary emotional wound. And we would get together and we'd find ourselves and we'd be very passionate and intense because we were recreating the circumstances that led to the wounding in a misguided attempt to heal the wound.
Yep.
And we were attracted to that, not because it was good, but because it was familiar.
Yep.
And this is tough because this goes back to childhood stuff. And children will accept any reality of which they're given. They don't even really, like, if a child is born and raised in chaos, he will think that chaos is normal. He won't even think that it's chaos. He will just think that it's normal. And so when he leaves the family where chaos makes sense, he goes and tries to, I'm a good boy. I'm doing what you're supposed to do in relationships, which is to be chaotic and unpredictable. And this is all I've ever seen. This is all I've ever known. I thought this is what you do. The fish can't see the water. And so it's particularly difficult for people who are raised in high conflict or broken or dysfunctional families. Yeah. But it is possible to overcome that wounding, to heal that wounding and to overcome that programming. And at 30, I mean, hopefully you have at least another 50 good years of life left. So even if it takes a few years to do, it's like, that's worth doing.
What else are you going to do?
Not hopeless.
How else are you going to spend your time if not working on this stuff?
Yeah, I guess you'd have to take up knitting or something.
How are you doing now? Are you still attracted to women based on your wounds? No,
because what I found is that as I worked to heal that emotional wounding, okay, so this is the other part of it, which is, so I'd have that sixth sense to the women that I could recreate those dramas with. And then they would get too crazy and I'd think, I just can't handle this anymore. I just want a nice, stable woman. And just like in the romantic myth, I'd find that nice, stable woman and I would be bored to tears. And I would think, I don't feel anything. And so I felt for a long time like I had this terrible choice between what I was really attracted to, but was terrible for me. So something that I didn't really feel anything for, but I knew was like healthy and mature. And neither one of those.
Look on your face, like, oh, like a good woman who treats me well. What a drag.
Well, yeah, if you eat junk food all your life, you think that you know, vegetables are disgusting. But you see how it is. So I had to like try to squeeze up some attraction for some of these stable women, and that didn't work. Or I tried to make the unstable women more stable and mature, and that didn't
domesticate them. Yeah.
So basically, I had to change me because I couldn't change the women. And as I processed this stuff and healed it, surprise, surprise, my authentic attraction began to change. Like I didn't have to try to be attracted to different women. My authentic desire began to shift, and I started to become attracted to emotionally stable, secure women as I became more emotionally stable and secure. And holy shit, does that solve a lot of problems? Getting in, you just never encounter them when you get into relationships with emotionally stable, secure women.
Oh man,
it's great.
Oh, it's so beautiful. It's just, that's the story of so many men. What you just put is so well, and it's a good reminder to me that like I'll admit I'm human. Sometimes I get frustrated at guys who are in that stage that you're at of like, she's great, but I'm bored. I'm like, what? Like, you know, sort of do that. But I love the fact that you actually articulated that the desire naturally shifted once you made that shift. That's what guys should be aspiring to. And it's one of the reasons why I say, Like, I'm not a big fan of these guys who are just like living the player lifestyle. Like, that's not my version of masculinity, is just fucking a bunch of women, because I've seen too clearly the psychological underpinnings of a man who needs that kind of level of distraction and novelty. I'm not a big fan of polyamory. I'm not, because to me, you can see how, based on what you just said, monogamy with a good woman is almost a test of character. Only somebody who's genuinely comfortable and at peace inside themselves and who's done that work is going to be able to unlock those innate feelings of, yes, I actually like this. I actually enjoy this. And this is a fine line for me to walk, because I'm very sensitive to accusations that I would shame male sexuality. And I'm not doing that. I get it. Male brain, new women, different body parts. Hugely stimulating. I get the evolutionary psychology of it. I'm never going to deny that. Even me, 13 years into a relationship, a pretty girl comes up on the TV screen. I notice. I get that. But what I'm saying is that that doesn't necessarily trump out the stuff that Dr. Orion was talking about, that natural affection, that natural love that springs up when you're coming from a more emotionally healthy place. Suddenly that drama queen party girl that used to excite you so much, she just looks like a hot mess. You're just like, fuck no, I don't want to touch that. I don't want to get that in my space, my nice, clean, psychologically pure space. I don't want it contaminated with that kind of toxic, low-quality woman anymore. She's no longer interesting. Oh, look, this girl treats me nicely. She smiles. She pays me compliments. She asks me how my day was. Suddenly, I'm like able to appreciate that in a whole new way. And I hope that everybody aspires for that.
Yeah, I think I watched a John Mulvaney stand-up routine. He's a comedian, and I think he opened with, I didn't know that relationships were supposed to feel good. And everybody laughed. And he was like, that's not a joke. That's just an observation. This is the first time I was in a relationship and it improved my quality of life. And that's a life-changing experience for a lot of guys, for sure.
It kind of, sorry to jump in, but I really want to make this point. It kind of speaks to the primacy of our psychological need to heal those initial wounds. In that, if you've got a girl in front of you and you could have a romantic connection with her, but subconsciously you're sabotaging it, you're picking fights, you're provoking behaviors, what your brain is trying to do is resolve those emotional wounds that Dr. Orion was talking about from earlier on. And that just says everything, that how big an impact this trauma stuff has on us, in that when choosing between, should we just enjoy the present moment and have nice feelings of love, or should we make this a hell, but it's a hell that's potentially going to heal this deeper hell that's inside me, the brain moves towards this. And so men, don't underestimate it. Men are way too cocky about their mental health. You've probably seen this, like, I'll just go to the gym. I'll just make a whole bunch of money. I'll just fuck enough women. And then that'll solve it. It won't. It won't. You got to take this stuff seriously, because if you don't, when the time comes and you're in front of a good woman, if you haven't sorted your shit out, you'll fuck up the relationship. You'll sabotage it, because your brain so desperately needs to heal this stuff. And I've just seen, sorry for getting a bit worked up, but I've seen so many requests in my Hey Hero, in my Patreon DMs, from guys who have fucked up good relationships because they underestimated how messed up they were inside, that they didn't take it seriously. And so I really, really want men to hear that message, that if you want to have a good relationship in the future, you can't half-ass this. You got to sort yourself out. Relationships with good women are a luxury of the men who've done the work on themselves. It's not available to anybody else. The best that you're going to be able to have is a dysfunctional relationship. And as far as I can see, that's an absolute truth. I've not seen it work otherwise.
Yeah, there's a lot there. So the way I usually say it is that you can't solve internal problems with external solutions. So if you have an inner wound or an internal void, which is often how it's experienced, you're going to try to fill it with money, with drugs, with TV or video games, with food, with sex, and it doesn't work. That hole inside you is insatiable, and it cannot be filled with something that's external to itself, but it can be filled with something, it can be healed internally. And what you described about how messed up guys go to relationships and mess those up in similar ways, in clinical psychology, we have a term for that. We call that a enactment or a reenactment. And this happens in the therapy office too. And there's this kind of a tragedy to this, because the unconscious rationalization for this behavior is, okay, I was really messed up by this experience in the past. and I can't go back and change the past. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to recreate the same emotional experience in the present so that I can work through it and have a different outcome. The tragedy is that most people haven't learned the skills of being or relating to achieve a different outcome. So what they have a lot of skills in recreating the same situation, but they don't have the skills to do anything different within that situation. And so they're trying on this. This was an idea from Freud, actually. They're trying unconsciously to solve these emotional problems by recreating the same emotional experiences, but they lack the skills and the transcendence to actually achieve a different outcome. And so that's why they end up hitting their head against the wall over and over again.
But that's why a therapist is so valuable. In case people don't necessarily understand it, it's not just, oh, I need someone to listen to my problems. It's because while you might lack the skills to resolve it, you don't need those skills yet. You can turn up to a therapist's office and just recreate all that stuff in the relationship with the therapist in a pure psychodynamic way. And then the therapist will talk you through how to resolve it. They will, because that's what they're paid to do. That's what they're trained to do. They're going to be the sensible ones in the relationship, and then they'll help you fix that.
Well, a little asterisk there. That's what a good therapist will do. And unfortunately, like any other profession, there's some good therapists, there's some bad therapists, and a lot of them are going to be mediocre. So if you are going to go the route of hiring a therapist, it's on some level, you actually kind of want to approach it like dating, is that you might have to talk to a number of people before you find somebody that clicks and that will really help you. And for those who are interested in going down that route, you don't have to try it for like 3 months or 6 months to see if it works. I worked with many therapists until I found the one that really worked for me. And I worked with him for 7 years in my 20s. And I resonated with him from the very first session. Like, he told me something and he clarified something to me in the session in real time that I was never able to put quite into words, and that something just sort of got unlocked. And I knew that this was a relationship that held something of promise for me. Versus other relationships, I went in for 6 to 12 months, and at best, they didn't make me worse. You know, so it is possible to have a mediocre therapeutic experience.
Was your therapist a man?
Help you do that. What you described.
Was your therapist a man?
He was. I've talked to one female therapist for about 12 months, and she was one of the ones that didn't hurt me, but I didn't particularly find very helpful.
I think that with a good female therapist, they can be really, really useful. But what I've heard from a lot of guys is that they can't talk about the relationship, the dating, the sex stuff with a woman and actually get the kind of recognition that they need. It's just too different. And I do think that at a certain point, we just need to sort of accept that it's like, all right, there are some mental health issues unique to men that you need to speak to another man, because without that feeling of, oh, I'm being seen and I'm being understood, you're not really going to trust the other person who is actually going to have your back or take any of his advice or even work through it properly. And so generally, I advise men to see male therapists. If you've got a good female therapist, don't give it up. But typically, that's been the advice that I've given.
Yeah, I think that's true. There are 3 topics in particular that I think it's easier for a man to talk to another man about than another woman, and those are sex, power, and aggression. And these are 3 things that are kind of at the core of a lot of masculine experience, especially the aggression. Like, some men, the only emotion they can consistently identify and experience is anger. And anger perceived by another man is likely experienced very differently than anger perceived by a woman.
Yep.
And I think it's so much more threatening for a woman to experience male aggression and male anger. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to spill over into violence, but it can be threatening.
Yep. And
as a guy, I think you have to work through your anger. It's like the easiest emotion for us to feel, but it's just, you don't want to stay trapped there. It's not like numb or angry. That's no way to live. That's kind of like being a bull or some sort of violent beast. It's not human. But there's a lot of men that get trapped there because they don't have any, let's say, sympathetic outlets for the basis of their anger, which is generally pain.
Yep.
An angry man is a man in pain. And there's a lot of research that suggests that depression in particular is expressed differently in men and women. The depression that you read about in the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, is more correlated with a female presentation. This is kind of like sad and moping around, low self-esteem, low self-worth. Men can obviously get that too. But there's increasing evidence that men experience and manifest depression through like irritability and withdrawal and isolation and even self-destructiveness.
Yep. I agree with all of that. It makes me think about the work that I do. I run a couple of online men's groups, and some of the guys that we've come across who are shut down emotionally, we've used anger as a means of unlocking those emotions, and it can be a flood, which is really, really, I remember one exercise where we kind of took turns, you know, no, I won't share just because I feel like that might be violating some privacy stuff. So I apologize for leading people down a false road there, but I definitely agree with everything you're saying. Anger is a bit of a secondary emotion, and it's used to try and to give a sense of control, I suppose. And it can be quite a motivating emotion, you know, like if you need to get shit done, being angry is actually quite a good state to be in. But it's so difficult in this culture because women don't tolerate male anger, and there's so much shame about it. And that's tough for a lot of men who are like, but I feel angry and there's no outlet. It's like, all right, well, in the first instance, let's create an environment where, one, you can express some anger with some other guys and we're not going to shame you. That's an important part. But two, we can also provide the safety outlet that Dr. Orion was talking about for you to talk about the emotions that are underneath that anger. And that's a difficult process for a lot of guys because the fear, I suppose the fear is that they're not going to be able to shut it off. And men don't like feeling like they're not in control. And I think that's probably why, as a whole, the whole emotional side of life is a bit frightening to men, because emotions are not as within our like autonomy and our direct control as like thoughts are, you know, and beliefs that we can analyze and reflect. You know, if it's like, okay, well, we're just going to feel all the pain that exists inside you, all of the sadness. A lot of men are like, I have no idea how deep that goes. I don't know which way it's going to flow. Like that's too frightening. I can't sort of, you know, let that happen. And it's one of the reasons why I'm passionate about the men's group work we do, because it's like, well, we can provide some structure, you know what I mean? We'll keep you grounded. You're not alone in this. And I'm a strong believer that very intense emotions probably shouldn't be experienced by yourself. I think that can lead to feelings of isolation and shame, and it's kind of bad. You know, I'm a big fan of actually creating relationships, whether that's with a therapist, a girlfriend, or in like a men's group setting or anything like that, where those deeper emotions are expressed in the company of somebody else. I think that's incredibly healing. And I think that that's actually what our brains psychologically are wired for.
Well, provided they're safe and trustworthy, because I would say that if they're not, it might be better to holster those emotions until you can find somebody who is. 100%. About anger, I usually say it's a powerful servant, but a terrible master. And it can be a force that, if you can yoke it appropriately, can be incredibly motivating and effective. But paradoxically, even though men generally feel more empowered or in control when they give into anger, they're much less so. Once they start to see red, they're the charging bull, and it's really the bullfighter who's in control of that situation. It's whoever's waving the cape that's going to control where the bull goes and what the bull does. And spoiler alert, it doesn't usually end well for the bull at the end of those contests.
Yeah.
Now, to be fair, you use the term secondary emotion. Yeah, that's what we say in psychology, which basically means that anger very rarely arises spontaneously on of itself. It's usually a reaction to a more primary emotion like fear or grief or pain. That said, there is a place for anger, especially in depressives. Some people believe that depression is appropriate anger that's inappropriately directed towards the self. And so sometimes when you're working with really clinically depressed folks, when they actually begin to express their frustrations with other people, it's a step in the right direction.
Okay, yeah, that all makes sense.
Yeah, they probably shouldn't stay there, but like for the first time, they're feeling safe enough to express that anger, because that's the other thing, is that you can only express anger when we feel safe. Mm-hmm. Like all these protests that we see in the Western world, like that's kind of because these societies are fairly safe. You don't see that in North Korea or in other cultures.
It makes me think of parenting with like a lady I know, her teacher would tell her that her daughter was so sweet at school. And the mum's like, God, she gets home and she's like angry about this and having a tantrum about this. And I think that's a symptom of what you're just talking about, is that she actually does have those emotions of anger, but school's not the safe place for her to express that. But at home, where she's comfortable and familiar with the surroundings and she knows her mum's going to love her no matter what, it gives her that outlet to be able to express that anger.
And that's appropriate for children. But one of I think I made a video about this. It's called The Most Toxic Relationship Belief. And the belief is basically, in my relationship, I get to say and do and be whoever I want. Like out there at school, that's where I have to control myself. At work, that's where I have to put on the front. But when I come home, I should just be able to let it all out. And I think that's tough, because what ends up happening is that we tend to treat the ones that are closest to us, the ones who treat us the best, sometimes the worst. They see sides of themselves sides of us that maybe it would be best if they put on a little bit more of a, not necessarily a veneer, but they had a little bit more foresight into revealing. Mm-hmm. Like I think of relationships as roles. And I think the only time you really truly get to be yourself is when you're by yourself. And like, it's inappropriate for you when you're engaging with your daughter, you're in the father role. So there are certain things that are appropriate for you to do and probably inappropriate for you to do. When you're engaging with your partner, you're in the husband role. And that comes with certain privileges and responsibilities. But the idea that I should just be able to be myself, warts and all, no matter what, and expect you to love and cherish me, I think that's tough, because it can feel like they treat the stranger on the bus better than us. And that's not a good place to be in.
It's the trait of a low quality woman. It's really good. Love everything you just said. And just to add on to it, is that she mistakes the expression, sometimes the obnoxious expression of her pain in the form of anger, blame, insults, as though she's just being authentic, she's being real, something like that. And it's a bullshit rationalization used to abuse somebody innocent. I think it's totally fucked up, and I've really no tolerance for it. I can understand if you've never come across this information, maybe once or twice, but when you see the impact it has on your partner, you really should cut it out straight away. And so this goes for any men who are listening. If you do this to your partnership as well, you can't just be angry and like yelling and blaming them for stuff and being like, well, I'm just being authentic, I'm just being real. No, you're being a dick. You need to cut that out. What the obligation for you, if you want to be real in a relationship, is you need to find out, well, what is the primary emotion? And if it's sadness, if it's fear, you need to communicate that, not in a way that blames the other person, in a way that brings them in and enlist them as an ally, as a teammate. You know, like if you did feel really angry about something, okay, you might, say a few sentences and then she'll be like, whoa, what the hell? You need to take a moment, you need to step away and then come back and be like, you know what, I actually think I'm just scared that, we're not as close as we used to be, or that I'm scared I'm not making enough money and I'm taking it out. And then she's like, oh, like, I'm here for you. I hear that. Let's work through it. And then suddenly you're not in competition with each other. You're not trying to recreate it or push some bullshit drama or something like that. It's like, no, you're actually working towards the solution. So any guys out there who think that it's their job as the man to like listen while their partner is like raving and ranting and insulting and having tantrums and things like that, no, she's not being real. You're not privileged or anything like that. She's being obnoxious and entitled, and you don't have to put up with it. You can demand actual authenticity, and that requires her being vulnerable, because there's not really any vulnerability in anger. And if she's not being vulnerable, then she's not grounded in reality. And what progress can you actually make unless the two of you are actually in reality?
Okay. So this might be a point of departure that we may have, because the way that you're describing it is like the importance of being emotionally vulnerable with your partner, not necessarily just spewing every thought or feeling out the moment that you have it without a censor or without any kind of processing, but to bring your emotional vulnerability to your partner and to discuss that and resolve that in collaboration potentially. And I think that that is possible in relationship, and it's probably only possible though in very high functioning, effective communicators with emotional stability. Would you agree with that?
Yes, but I feel like I might be being led into a trap. I want to know where you're going.
Sure. So one of the concepts that I have is that the captain can't complain, and this I kind of approach relationships from the perspective that the man is the leader of the relationship.
Yeah.
And so that it's not a pure equality, and that there is a hierarchy in the relationship. And there are privileges and responsibilities that come with both of those positions. Like ideally, the woman is like the first mate. It's a very elevated position. They offer feedback and counsel, and a good captain will take that under consideration, but it's ultimately his call for the good of the ship, which is the nuclear family that he is leading. And one of the let's say the responsibilities of a captain is that he's like role bound not to share his troubles with the subordinates, with the crew, as it were. Because one thing that women are really good at doing is they're sort of like good at incubating and then reflecting back. It's like in every culture and every mythology that I'm aware of, the moon is feminine. And what does the moon do? It reflects the light of the sun, which in every culture that I'm aware of is the masculine. And so it's like the woman will take what the man gives it and like incubate it and give it back to him and shine it back to him. You give a woman a little sperm, she'll give you back a baby, kind of a thing. But if you give her a little ounce of trouble or a little ounce of fear or insecurity, she might bring that back to you in a much more amplified way. So my perspective is, as a man, you are going to have fears, you are going to have concerns, but it might be more appropriate to bring that to your fellow captains, like other men that you have trusted relationships with, or your father or your therapist, than necessarily your first mate. What do you think about that?
I think many things about that. I need to approach this quite delicately. I understand the point that you make and the general trend of it, and I disagree with the ultimate outcome, and I disagree for heaps of reasons. And I'm a little surprised that we're going to depart on this one, but I think this will be very worthwhile to find out if we get to the end of this, if I change my mind or if you change yours, or if we just offer two alternate perspectives and let the audience decide. That's also completely fine. So the first thing that I would say is I would not personally enjoy being in a relationship if I could not be real with my partner. That's one of the biggest joys I get from my relationship, is the ability to be vulnerable and to feel cared for by her. And if I felt like I was unable to do that, I would significantly my relationship would be a lot less enjoyable. So I think that one of the dangers of your advice is that you're selling women short on what they're capable of doing, and in so doing, selling men short, and that if they follow your advice, they're not going to reach the full heights of pleasure that's possible in a relationship because they're artificially handicapping themselves. That's one of the first thoughts that comes up to me. But I feel like that's not really worth discussing at the moment, because first we need to discuss whether or not that's true. What you've said is that women are destined to do that. And I think that that's one of the dangers of applying a whole bunch of truth, which you just did, and then making a kind of, what I would say is like a leap into an outcome as though it's absolutely predestined to be this way. But I have to tread a little bit carefully and actually figure out why I think this. Well, the first instance is that because it just doesn't track with my experience. So maybe I'll just safely speak from that, is that when I correctly identify the true source of an emotion, and I can bring it to my partner in a vulnerable sense, it does not frighten her, it reassures her. It demonstrates that I'm capable of self-reflection, that I take responsibility for the actual source of what's going on for me, and I trust her to know that information and to treat it delicately, and then we resolve it right then and there, so it doesn't linger as an issue. So it serves as an incredibly strong process of pair bonding for the two of us, and we're so much closer because of it. I can't relate to the picture that you just spoke about of a woman taking those things and then leaving with regards to my own partner, to me, that just sounds like a woman who's not emotionally mature enough to be able to handle real intimacy, like a low quality woman stuff. And I'm sort of like, well, I wouldn't be interested in dating a woman who didn't have that basic human capacity.
Okay. I mean, you have some points there. You might be right. Maybe this is a way that we can approach a common ground on this. There's a difference potentially between for a man going to his woman and saying, I'm afraid, I'm feeling really insecure about money, and that's causing me to like lose sleep and to worry about our future.
Yeah. And
a guy who comes to his woman and says, I've been feeling concerned about money and our financial future. And so this is my plan. And I have this idea for resolving this anxiety in a like reality-based way. But I'm not, and the difference I think is not just I'm bringing my feelings, I'm also beginning to work towards the solution. And I think that can make things more reassuring for the woman.
Yeah. So, and let me try and rephrase what you said, and you tell me if you agree with my rephrasing, is that you can't ever bring your emotions to a woman in a codependent way. You can't ever bring your vulnerability to her expecting her to solve it.
If that's what you mean by codependent, yeah, you can't expect your woman to solve your problems. Yes. And so a lot of guys, and maybe this is where we might have some commonality, they might bring the fear to the woman, hoping that like a good mommy, she will assuage his fear and say everything is going to be okay and rub his back and I believe in you. And that might actually undermine the trust and confidence in his leadership if there's enough repetitions of that.
Exactly. Okay. I think we might be on the same page, and I really do hope people don't click out of this video. Let us resolve this discussion, because actually where we end up on this one is going to be really, really important. So I definitely agree with that. And it was difficult for me to make the points I was making earlier, because I'm aware that people could misinterpret what I've said and do what I do with my relationship, and they could do it badly. They could do it in a codependent way. And for the most part, people need to follow your advice, because my read on the general male population is there's too many, white knight, simpy, kind of looking for their girlfriends to be their mothers kind of energy around there. And there needs to be a lot more taking responsibility. I guess I don't want people to think of their relationships as going to be limited to, when I'm struggling, I can't talk to my partner about it. That's not appropriate. And I really hope people listen quite carefully, because here's the nuance of it. Sometimes the solution to an emotion or vulnerability that you're experiencing doesn't have a clear practical piece of action that needs to take to resolve it. Sometimes the compassionate witnessing by your partner is the solution. There's an emotion, there's a vulnerability that you felt your entire life, and it's never been seen, understood, or cared about by anybody. And when you bring that to your partner, in a sense, you're coming to them for a solution, but it's not any deeper other than, I've just discovered this about myself and I want to share it with you. And then you discover that in them listening and caring about that, you're like, oh my God, I'm no longer carrying this burden of this emotion I considered shameful by myself anymore. I was able to demonstrate it in front of a person I love and trust. They still love me in return. I'm just feeling 1% more acceptable inside myself. Problem solved. That's the kind of fix. And so we're kind of talking about levels here. In the first stage of a relationship, when you're still working through this codependency, need my girlfriend to mother you, follow the advice Dr. Orion gave. It's really, really good. Take responsibility for it. Keep it in your frame. Don't be codependent. But also, once you're in a relationship and that's established, she loves you, she trusts you, you're committed, don't limit yourself and hold yourself back from potential pair bonding experiences that could be really, really amazing for your growth, really, really inspire more loyalty and trust and love with each other. These parts of yourself that previously you're like, no, I can't show her that, I can't show her that. If you love and trust this girl and she's your partner and the issues you're dealing with are just existential things to do with the universe, you could make the both of you feel way less lonely if you actually open up and trust. And there's an experience of pleasure that comes from that I would never trade for anything. It's probably I dare say it might be my favorite thing about my relationship. And so that might be why I unnecessarily jumped the gun in the initial conversation. I thought we were coming from different places, because I assumed what you were talking about was like, never have that. And I was like, fuck, like that's not where I'm coming from at all. But I don't think, well, I'll let you respond now, but I don't think we're actually on different pages as much as I thought that we were.
Not as much. I do think that was very well said. And of course, you need to be able to bring your concerns and your issues to your partner. A captain, if there's water coming into a ship, he can't pretend that it's not sinking. That said, he can't just devolve into panic and hope to be reassured by his crew. He has to keep his wits about him and spring into action in a reality-based way to solve the problem. But what you're getting at is very emotionally advanced. It's subtle, and it's something that you can definitely do with a mature woman who is an effective communicator, who's emotionally attuned and in a trusting, loving relationship. And this sharing of yourself with each other is actually an important component of becoming yourself. I think this is why in all 12-step programs, part of the process is to admit to another person and to God that you have a problem. It's like you need to be able to overcome the shame of the hiding and the isolation and reveal yourself to another person in a safe and appropriate context in order to move in the direction of becoming more yourself and overcoming the addiction that you're struggling with. So I think was actually very well said on your part.
Can I jump in and just say that was very awkward that I had to do that, because I would never really talk about that in my YouTube videos. I would never make a video about that, because what I said was so easily misunderstood. And it's hard to protect against that. I think a lot of guys will take what I said and think, oh, good, I can now look for my girlfriend to solve my problems for me. You know what I mean? Like, it is quite an emotionally advanced thing. And because I do think that too many men are doing that, it's not the kind of thing that I'd usually say publicly, like, because of its potential to be misunderstood. It's more something that would come about in like a one-on-one, like if I was helping somebody out and they were at that kind of stage. But
what I would also say,
so it was interesting being put on the receiving end of like, God, 99% of the time I would be saying exactly what you're saying, but it's just in this one instance I'm like, no, I think you can be even greedier. I think you can get even more out of your relationships. So it was quite an interesting exchange for me.
Yeah. Okay. I think that was, again, very well said. What was I going to say about this? I was going to jump in, but I think I lost it. If it's important, it'll come back.
Can I say it's exciting, I suppose, that the conversation for me is being pushed in this direction, because I don't think that there's, like, in terms of like men's advice online, from the little I've seen, it's very, very surface level. And one of the things that excites me about the fact that like you reached out to chat to me and like looking at your channel, there's been such like tremendous growth and like people are watching your stuff, is it makes me feel like this information about the differences between men and women is going more mainstream. If we can take a guy like you who had a successful, you know, private therapy practice, and now you are like, this is so important that I'm going to start a YouTube channel about it, and I'm going to talk to men about these differences and about dating stuff. And I was interviewed on another podcast, the Emily and Todd podcast, and Todd, again, is a guy from New York, and he has a successful private therapy practice. And I'm like, cool, like 7 years ago, you know, it's guys like me who don't have any formal education in psychology or just really passionate amateurs. We're making videos, but, you know, we're kind of more on the fringe. And it's exciting to me that guys with more mainstream credibility are coming into this space and, dare I say, potentially bringing more reality, less histrionic kind of emotionality and victimhood and tribalism, you know, to it. So look, I like that last exchange there is I feel like is a good example of the conversation in this space, hopefully elevating more and more and more with the introduction of people like you coming in.
Oh, thank you. But I think there's also ways in which the mainstream media and the mainstream professions really fail people as well. And that's what I've always loved about YouTube, is the democratic potential of the medium. And I do think that ultimately it should be the truth and the validity of what is being said that should matter more than the credentials or the authority of whoever is saying it. And I guess it's nice that here I am, a licensed psychologist who's saying some of these things. Maybe that means that some people will listen because I have the degrees and the diplomas. But ultimately, the truth of anything that I say or anything that you say is does it bear with reality, and does it work? Like, does the plane fly when we follow these laws? And I think that it's really important for me and for other folks to not devolve to arguments of authority, and to believe that just because I have this training or I have this degree that I necessarily know more than somebody else. That's not the case. And I think that we can all get better at evaluating arguments on their own merit, independent of the sources from which they arise. And that's really the possibility of democratic mediums like social media, and a way of moving towards integration of our increasingly polarized society. Is like, we should be able to take the truth on both sides, or all sides, because there's more than just two sides, and use that to improve our lives and to increase harmony in our relationships.
So two things is, one is I very much agree with you on the appeals to authority argument, but my point was more that reality does come first, but now look at people coming to reality. That's exciting. So that's come primacy, but I'm a little bit more cynical about the sort of meritocracy argument that you just made about social media. I think it's true in certain pockets, but what I've seen becomes popular on social media is not necessarily what's true. It's what triggers emotions, what validates victimhood, what inspires tribalism. Often the things that kind of become really popular bear no bearing to reality. Reality is actually kind of shunned. It's actually what's convenient, you know, and things like that. I do think that certain pockets, you know, and I would, with no false humility, consider myself and your channel as well to be part of those pockets of the reason they're popular is because they're hitting truths. And it's like, oh no, that's why we're taking off and having some success. But I kind of see that more as the exception. So the sort of so-called like virtue of democracy of social media, I'm not so thrilled about. I'm a little bit more inclined, I think, maybe even than you are. And maybe if you spend 7 years on YouTube like I have, you might become more cynical like me. But I quite like the idea that some of this stuff is a little bit more, there's a little bit more gatekeeping involved, you know what I mean? Because there's so much fake information online and so much stuff that seems true and seems knowledgeable, but actually isn't. And the misinformation causes a lot of stuff. I actually do prefer that people have some kind of, I know what I'm talking about. I'm talking like, and it's this, and I don't mean that to become an appeals to authority. I just think that maybe there's a bit of a middle ground.
I hear what you're saying, and there's certainly truth to that. Like, I know that if I made more extreme or inflammatory content, I would have far more subscribers than I currently do, but that's just not how I want to operate. I think that if you have understanding of these media and marketing and positioning, you can grow very quickly and have like a more acute influence. But I think that these tend to be more flash in the pan. They don't tend to last as long. Yeah. I think the truth is slower to catch on, but it's harder to get rid of. So,
so good.
So that channels that are really more concerned about that, they grow more slowly because they generally grow through word of mouth as opposed to like paid promotion or marketing efforts. And they're very different. Once, like, the truth is the hardest virus to eliminate. And because once a person hears it, they never forget it. And one truth told to a person at the right time can be life-changing. So I really do think that on the whole, there's probably more opportunity to social media than liability. I do remember the thing I was going to say. So to just go to put maybe a cap on the conversation about, let's say, emotional intimacy with your partner, that it's also really, really important to emphasize that this is only appropriate in a safe and trusting relationship with a woman that you vetted. Because what I've often seen is that even when I would go out on first dates, sometimes when women found out that I was a therapist, they would start just like spilling their purse on the table and talking about how they had DUIs and their father abused them. And it's like, wow, I talk to guys and they have these like 12-hour first dates, 12-hour second dates where they stay up all night and they just talk about their childhood traumas and their dreams for the future. And it's like, that is way too much too soon. You don't know who this person is. You don't know what they're going to do with your vulnerability. And it is a shortcut to, like, let's say, accelerate the intimacy of the relationship, but it might not be appropriate. And these sorts of relationships, they tend to be, the ones that burn twice as bright, burn for half as long kind of a thing. They get really intense very quickly, and then they tend to flare out in really dramatic and high conflict ways. So that the vulnerability disclosure is not appropriate until you're much further along in the relationship. Would you agree with that?
So strongly agree with that. It's such a damaging idea to open up too quickly, too soon, because you're likely to get burned. And guess what happens then? All your trust issues, all your trauma, you're going to bury them even deeper. It's going to be harder to dislodge. So it just makes me sad listening to the description that you gave, though, because it just speaks to how much pain that people are living in, because they must know rationally that this is not a smart idea. You haven't vetted this person yet. What are you doing, spilling your guts? But if they're that desperate to find somebody and to finally speak about this stuff, they're being driven to that, even though it's completely irrational to do so. And that's really depressing that that's where people are at, but it's not going to work. There's a level of disclosure, emotional disclosure, that's appropriate at the start of a relationship, and it's very, very small. Mostly you want to be having fun, like flirt, tease, have some laughs, be a bit sexual. Like, that's what the start of a relationship should look like. And then later on, it's like, okay, we like each other's energy, we like each other's vibe, what about values? Can we actually talk? Like, what kind of a life do you imagine? It's like, oh, there's actually some similarities. All right, I'm going to invest a little bit further. And it's really only once you're in an established relationship, it's like, okay, like, if we're going to do this, there's some things I'd like to, explore with you. It's like, this thing happened to me when I was a kid, I'm taking care of it, but you should know. And she's like, thank you so much for sharing with me. I don't think any less of you. And like, all right, cool. I dipped my toe in the water. It went well. Next time I'll go a little bit further. It's got to be sensible, timed, based on the feedback that you're getting. If you're just like trauma dumping on people, you're only going to traumatize yourself further. It's a really bad strategy. And also, women don't find it attractive. Women like, just straight up, you're not going to keep women if you do that, because women are not attracted to men who don't have control of themselves in this way, who can't read basic social cues and know that that's not appropriate. You've got to come across as masculine, on top of your stuff, within your frame. So yeah, total disaster. I agree with everything you said.
Yeah, that's interesting. In therapy, we have this term called an emotionally disconfirming experience. And that's when a person is able to do the thing that he's afraid of, and the outcome is non-terrible, and therefore he can let go of a lot of the baggage around the thing. And that's actually what changes people, not insight, not like learning that, oh, my mom did this and my dad did that, not necessarily paying a therapist hundreds or thousands of dollars. It's about having emotionally disconfirming experiences. And you can have those with a therapist, but there's always a part of you that knows that this is like a paid professional that you're doing it with. So the real way that people get better is to have that emotionally disconfirming experience in the real world. Is that they can go out there and, let's say they have terrible approach anxiety, they can go up to a woman and it's a non-terrible experience, maybe even a positive experience. And that is going to be worth more than 10 therapy sessions. That said, you have to create the context that makes it more likely that it will be a successful situation, So if you run off half-cocked and you just approach a woman willy-nilly, it might actually end up badly, and then that reinforces your pre-existing beliefs about women. Same thing with the trust issues that you were saying. So yes, there is a possibility to be healed in our relationships, but in general, we should try to do as much healing on our own as possible before we seek out relationships with others. That's my belief.
But like we've established, those emotionally disconfirming experiences that are so much more transformative than just insights, they happen in relationship.
They do.
So, I mean, it's one of the reasons I'm so passionate about the men's group. I call them hero circles that I run, because it's not just me who's somewhat like the facilitator or whatever, but there's a bunch of other guys. And so when they're having these experiences of, I've never shared this with anybody, there's regular dudes who are all, disconfirming that that's a shameful thing. They're all like, no, man, we hear you. We love you. It's all still good. It's very, very transformative. And that's why the focus for me as the facilitator is away from intellectual discussions and trying to find insights, and more is into experiential relationship stuff, because coming from the kind of psychodynamic kind of like place that I come from, like to me, that's where the real transformation comes from. It's so much more interesting.
I facilitated a lot of groups as a therapist, and there's a lot of evidence that suggests that the outcomes from group therapy are superior to the outcomes in individual therapy.
I believe it.
Group therapy is real. The idea of group therapy is really scary to people who have never experienced it, but the potential for accelerated transformation is unparalleled. And the reason, there's a fantastic book by a group therapist named Irvin Yalom, who is
I love that book. I've read it so much.
That book is fantastic. And he has a whole chapter about the mechanisms that are unique to group therapy that help people improve in that modality. And one of them is just that another dude, not a therapist, not a trained or paid professional, just another human being, just like you, says, dude, I have the same problem. And it's like that normalizing experience of opening up, thinking that you were the only one who was suffering from this in the entire universe, and then being met with like compassion, understanding from somebody who's not being paid to do that is really incredible. So there's a great potential in group therapy. It's hard. People are very scared about group therapy usually before they try it, but it can be a great thing.
I'm such a strong believer. I read the book Group by Christy Tate, and it really blew my mind. And then I read a bunch of Yalom's books, but I bought the big fat like textbook.
It's huge. Yeah.
It's a long one. It's a long one. But as I read it, I was just like, shit, this is, as far as I could tell, based on my 35 years of living on this planet, the stuff he was talking about offered the best, most sensible way to achieve mass change for a bunch of people, those conditions. And so even though what I offer in these hero circles is not therapy, because I'm not a licensed therapist, I say the effect is therapeutic because we borrow heavily from that stuff as we support each other.
Right on. Well, I think that's probably a good place to stop. I think I could talk to you all day, Alexander, and this has been a wonderful conversation. If people want to know more about you, where should they go?
Can I be greedy and bring up one more topic before we wrap it up?
If you like, sure.
How comfortable are you talking about your personal relationship? Do you talk about it on your channel?
Not usually. I don't usually talk about my personal relationship, and that's just out of like concern for the woman's privacy. I've already noticed that people are searching out who this person might be, and I want to kind of like maybe protect her from that on some level.
I get it, man. I spent 6 years on YouTube before I told anybody I was in a relationship. It was just like complete blank as far as anybody knew I was single. And then at some point I was like, I don't mind anymore. I didn't feel as vulnerable about it. But I'm a very intensely private person. So even though I have a bunch of questions, and I'm sure people would appreciate the questions I'm going to ask, I think it's more important that you've got some boundaries. So I'm not going to push. We can wrap things up.
Okay. Well, I am in a relationship. It's a committed relationship, and we've been dating for several years now, and I'm very happy with the way things are going. So I'll leave it at that.
Can we ask one question? Like, how does she feel about your YouTube channel? Is that too personal?
No, not at all.
Okay.
I mean, she follows me, and I think she watches every single thing I publish. Wow. She's a very supportive partner.
Are you watching right now, Orion's girlfriend? Are you listening to my words right now?
Probably. Like she watches the long form interviews as well. So she has always been supportive of what I'm doing here. I think and a lot of this is my ideas about women and relationships. And so it's out there, it's not like I'm hiding this from her. I think when I've talked to her about this in the past, she says, I disagree with some of the things that you say, Orion, but you also bring up things that I've never thought about. And so it's useful for me to consider it from your perspective. So it's never caused any kind of difficulty or conflict in my relationship, my YouTube channel.
I'm particularly curious to know what she would think of the exchange that we just had about the nature of emotional intimacy. Like if you were to go to her and you're just like, I've just had this existential fear of death come over, and I just can't help but feel kind of panicked, and I don't know what to do with it. Would she be like, yo, Captain, what the fuck? I'm the crewmate. You should not be talking to me about this. Or would she be like, oh my God, I have that sometimes as well. I feel so much closer to you. Like I'm very curious to know how she would feel about what you talked about and your relationship.
Well, on that particular note, I don't think it would come as any surprise. So anybody who knows me personally knows that I keep memento mori very close to heart. I've had several near-death experiences, and I suffered a lot of like loss and death of loved ones when I was young. So I don't really go a day without thinking about death. And that is actually what acutely motivates me to stay focused on what's important and to move in the direction of what I truly value. So that would not come as any surprise to her if I said that I was having some existential dread.
And do you feel like it's made her lose attraction for you, or do you think it's helped bond you sharing those things with her?
To be honest, on this particular point, I don't think that it's almost like a disconnect. She has not, as far as I can tell from what she's told me, she hasn't yet experienced that kind of existential concern yet. Yeah. I think it's only a matter of time. But she's also, her family is very intact. Her parents are still together. She has uncomplicated, loving relationships with her siblings. She has never really experienced any kind of significant suffering or hardship yet. So she's on some level been privileged by her life thus far, but on some level she's also been handicapped because I think that it can prevent her from understanding certain dimensions of experience. I found this to be the fact among my friends as well. So I have friends who I call normies, who they just don't understand certain things that I've gone through. They think that this only happens in movies or in soap operas. And let me tell you, the truth sometimes is stranger than fiction. But if people have never experienced how chaotic or how terrible relationships can be, or how difficult and painful life can be, it's almost like does not compute. It doesn't really get in at best, or they get a little uncomfortable at worst, because they kind of have this dim awareness that those things exist, and they don't want to really experience them yet, and they hope that they can prevent them for as long as possible. So we are very different with respect to certain emotional and psychological traits. Yeah. But I think we're complementary in that regard.
You almost want to preserve that innocence for as long as possible, right? Like you don't really want to infect somebody with that reality of like, if somebody is not dealing with an existential fear of death like every single day, you're almost like, well, why would I ruin that for them, right?
But there is a real gift to that memento mori, because it does sharpen your focus and keeps you motivated. It's also easy to let stuff go. I think it's easier to have more compassion for yourself and for other people. But I'm her first relationship. I mean, so that's...
How old is she?
She's 30.
Okay. That's okay.
Yeah, I'm not robbing the cradle.
Oh, well, I know you're a 40-year-old dude. Like, her first relationship. All right, this could take a turn. 30's fine.
So we have very different relationship experiences. We have very different life experiences, and that's okay. I think that's great.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Oh man, I thank you for sharing what you just did share with me. I obviously, I'm now excited to have like a deeper relationship with you in whatever form that might happen, in that like I'm now curious to find out what commonalities the two of us have had in our personal lives and share about that. This is probably not the appropriate platform to do that, but
it makes me happy, Alexander. I'd love to get to know you socially, and maybe we can be friends as well.
Oh, cool. I gotta say, it's when I started, if I can just be self-indulgent, but 7 years ago on YouTube, I really did feel like alone, like isolated, in that I was like, in my mind, I was like, okay, let's take the best of this manosphere type stuff, the stuff that's true, and then let's talk about how it fits into all the mainstream psychological stuff, which is not controversial. It's been established. And then that's kind of how my channel sort of fused together. But I was very alone in that. Like the people who would like say these are your colleagues, I'd see their stuff and I'm like, I don't feel like I have anything in common with that person at all. Like I don't get where they're coming from. They seem to be such a hateful individual. I don't like it whatsoever. More and more recently, the people who seem to be coming up and becoming more popular on YouTube, like yourself, I'm like, man, I fucking love this guy. Like, I hope their channel becomes huge. Like, I hope these are my new, like, YouTube colleagues. And in that vein, I don't know if you've come across his stuff yet. Have you seen the YouTube channel Wheat Waffles?
No, but I think the name has come up in my comments.
Okay, so like he's a guy I've got to know a little bit off screen as well. Some of his stuff I really disagree with, but he's a good guy. Like I think he's got a lot of integrity. He's very intelligent and he presents the black pill look stuff in as clean a rational way as you possibly can. I just wanted to mention his name to you as a future possible guest for your podcast. I would definitely watch that. He's a fascinating guy to chat to.
I'll look into it. But yeah, one of the great things about the channel growing is that it gives me the opportunity to connect with people like yourself. And that's been really fulfilling for me personally, is to expand my social network beyond just my private recording studio and my little, cadre of pre-existing relationships to really, I mean, here you are, you're in Australia, I'm in California, we're connecting from opposite ends of the earth because we have some points of commonality and shared vision and resonance. And that's an amazing thing that just wouldn't have been possible even a generation ago. And I think that's, for me personally, the real opportunity of this channel is that it can get me in contact with folks and to potentially build relationships with people that are just going to light me up and that I'm going to be jazzed to know and to talk to and spend time with. So that's
100%.
Selfishly part of why I'm doing this.
Also, I've made amazing relationships through the channel. I think you know Blair Daly, the guy who does the Commission for Boys and Men in Seattle, Washington.
Oh yeah, I did. He sponsored a video of mine. I think I called it "Divide and Conquer," and it's about the pressures that keep men and women pitted against each other, or see that men's issues and women's issues are zero-sum games.
Like, he is such a good guy and he's doing such amazing work. And I've known him for years. He was an early supporter of my channel, he even did some filming for me back when I was still doing like street interviews just to get some.
Oh, really?
American
He was
girls.
one of the guys who went out and asked the questions for you?
He was one of the best. Yeah. His videos that he filmed for me got hundreds of thousands of views. It was fantastic. But like, I've known him for a number of years and he's an ongoing supporter. He reached out to me on Patreon when I said like, oh, I'm going to be chatting with the guy from PsycHacks, Dr. Orion. He's like, I know him. He's great. Tell him that you know me and stuff like that. And I just had dinner with a guy has been, messaging me over Hey Hero for like a number of times. And I just took a recent family trip to Thailand and he lives in Thailand and we, caught up and I met his partner and we had like a great time, things like that. It's really good for socializing. And yeah, it puts you in contact with guys who you're not likely to just run into in your local town. But,
I do get recognized in Napa of all places, which is not a very big city. And that always sort of jazzes me and surprises me. It's still kind of a new experience. Do you still do your retreats in Thailand? I think you were offering that at least a few years ago, maybe before the pandemic.
They were great. It was really great. But yeah, so yeah, I was out there kind of scoping out a little bit for new locations to do so. I think post-pandemic, people were a little bit more skittish about traveling to developing countries and across the globe. I think what's probably more likely if we do those is I might actually fly to Europe or North America and we might do them there. But
I don't really think of Thailand as developing personally. I've been, it's so safe. They have all the amenities of civilization. It's a wonderful place to visit.
Yeah.
Oh,
I saw some shit.
Okay.
Like, you know what I mean? Like I would speak to the people who live there and they tell you stories about like some of the crime and some of the corruption and things like that. It's no slight on the people. The people are lovely and things like that. But I don't know what the appropriate label is. And I certainly don't want to be accused of being down on Thailand. I visited 3 times. I fucking love that country, but it certainly does feel different to here in Australia.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I just meant, I guess I never felt unsafe there like I have potentially in other places that I've traveled.
How far off road did you go?
Not far. I went to Bangkok, Chiang Mai, and Phuket.
Okay, yeah. No, I mean, and the people in rural Thailand can be lovely, but look, there's a lot of money to be made in in the tourism as well. And where there's money, that it attracts, some negative stuff. But we don't need to talk about this. I'm sure people aren't interested.
So let's wrap it up and
Yep.
tell the folks where they can find you if they want to learn more about what you're doing.
Go onto YouTube, type in Alexander Grace. That's my regular thing. From that, in the description box of any of my videos, you'll find links to my Patreon. So that's for more exclusive content, so a little bit more in depth. If you want my personal advice, you'll find Hey Hero. That's where people can write to me and I write back to them. And yeah, I don't have any spots available in my men's groups at the moment, but that's at some point where there might be more opportunity to actually interact with me every week, but not yet.
Okay, right on. Well, thank you so much for talking with me, Alexander. It was great to have you on, and thank you so much for spending time with me.
No worries. Thanks so much, everyone. Thanks for watching all the way to the end.
Bye-bye.